Running Fundamentals Part 4. I'm Graham Tuttle, the Barefoot Sprinter, and today, in this session, we're talking about strength training. And the bottom line is, you need to do it. But strength training doesn't necessarily just mean lifting weights. However, that's a big part of it. The first thing to understand is that running is a form of strength training. So that means that by running, you are getting stronger. The problem is that all strength training needs to have some form of progressive overload, meaning you have to continue to make it harder, because if you don't make it harder, your body adapts to what you're doing. So if all you do is steady state running at a low intensity and continue to do that, or walk, you're going to make that your ceiling. So you have to do things like sprinting and speed work and hill sprints to be able to maintain a higher ceiling so that everything else is sub-threshold. Having some form of speed and strength work as part of running is a sport-specific way to develop your capacity. In fact, the ancient Romans and Greeks used to use jumping and running as part of their strength training. So if you go out and you do short 100 meter, 200 meter sprints, or you're working on even shorter distance stuff or multi-directional stuff, that's an incredible way to develop your strength. Same thing with hill sprints. All these things work to get you stronger. That's going to improve your neural output, your skill, and your tissue tolerance. But that doesn't mean you get to skip the gym. And by gym, I mean some form of meaningful strength training with load. And the reason you have to have load is because load puts consequence on movement. By that, I mean that you have to learn to organize your body under a certain set of gravitational principles. If I just raise my arm out to the side with no consequence, this is great. But because I don't have to use any type of meaningful tissue organization, I don't actually have to learn the pattern of what I'm trying to do. There are certain muscles that pull on bones within fascial networks that create the movement patterns that we live through. When it comes to running, we cannot skip the part of having to organize that. Picking things up and setting them down, or throwing them, or rotating, or learning to lunge or squat, those are all movements. And those all combine to getting our joints strong and our muscles functional and our fascial lines conditioned appropriately. Strength training is what conditions your body to understand how to organize underneath load. But what should that strength training look like? Well, there's a lot of options for strength training, and if you're doing anything, it's going to be better than nothing. But it is important to make sure that you're not falling into another sport. Olympic lifting is a sport, crossfitting is a sport, powerlifting is a sport, bodybuilding is a sport, strongman is a sport. These are all sports, and you're going to have sport-specific movements. If you're going to bench press or snatch, those are sport-specific movements. And by that, I mean that you are learning to go to a certain depth and a certain range of motion that's required for competition. That does not necessarily mean that's the most functional for your body or the most healthful for your joints. So there are options. For example, instead of benching with a straight bar, you can bench with a multi-grip bar. It's an option because you're not training to be a powerlifter. You have options. So when you go look at training, remember, the world is your oyster. You can use a bunch of different implements and a bunch of different ranges of motion to get creative with it. That being said, these sports are generally organized around specific movements that are pretty global. So doing things like a squat, a bench, a deadlift, some form of a clean or hip extension, some form of a sandbag carry or a sandbag clean, or even just bodybuilding stuff with chest flies and bench presses and lunges. Those are all fantastic options to organize your body. So if you're doing anything, it means you're training your body to organize under load, and that generally, if you are continuing to pair that with running, will create a stronger, more resilient frame for running. That being said, there's a handful of principles I think that are really valuable that are going to help improve your overall training outcome. First is training unilaterally, which means we're using one side at a time. That could be a single arm bench press, a lunge, a split stance RDL, a split squat. Those all work one side at a time to help eliminate asymmetries, and they work on your coordination from one side to the other, and they work your core intentionally to stabilize. Second, work with your body in terms of functional patterns. So you want to think about stuff like sandbags or things that you hold internally to create torque within you. Those create this internal rotation, external rotation patterns that are so valuable for running. I'm a huge fan of sandbags. That's something I've really picked up and used for the last half a year at this point, and it's made a tremendous difference for my running and overall movement because it is intuitive, it's easy to learn, and it's very hard to mess up and very hard to get hurt with because you can pick up and your body is organizing in the way that it's designed to. So working functionally, but that also means just using your body in the pattern of having to stabilize and lift things, which essentially boils down to not using machines. I'm not saying machines are not pointed. We'll come back to the next part. But it is important to think about the fact that functional training uses your body as the structure, and you work around you use that to negotiate with the environment. Thinking functional, sandbags are fantastic. Kettlebells are another option. Maces, clubs, those all get you rotating and coiling. They're a fantastic way to unlock and open up your body. Third, think about muscle range of motion for what you can engage. This is where machines can be really valuable. doing something like a leg extension or a pec fly may not seem specifically functionally related to running, but it is incredibly important to connect with the muscle. And just because your muscle can anatomically move through a full range of motion doesn't mean you have that contraction and that ability when you're conscious and you're trying to use that under load. So by using machines, whether it's a cable fly, whether it's a hamstring curl machine, those things can teach you to engage with your muscles. This is the value of bodybuilding because it trains you to feel your muscles engage and it helps you find tension through a full range of motion. But you have to pair that with understanding that the tissue needs to go through a full range of motion. So there are muscles that work at joints, and then there's tissue, fascial lines that work across joints. This is the part of the mobility aspect where you have to think about stretching and opening up across long ranges of motion. This is value of something like yoga, or let's say even the fascial maneuvers like a human garage approach, where you're thinking about your body starting to open up in long stretched out positions. This is what keeps your tissue hydrated and healthy because you're pushing and pulling and remodeling that tissue along a full range of motion. So the muscles contract to create tension, and the long stretched out maneuvers keep the tissue healthy. And this is also important because this is your mobility training. One of the things that people misunderstand is they think of mobility training as a separate part from strength training. But all mobility training is essentially strength training at a lighter load under a longer range of motion. So effective stretching is essentially stretching or under load through a full range of motion. So when you think about training both the muscle in a short range of motion and contracting and getting better engagement and working on this fascial tissue, this connective tissue that stretches and pulls your entire body, that is the quintessential strength and mobility spectrum. You have to work on both sides because if you just do your muscle and you don't work on your connective tissue, you'll get stiff and stuck. But if you just do your connective tissue and open up long, you'll be lax and you won't have any ability to create strength in these motions. We want mobility, which is the crossover of strength and range of motion. We don't want laxity, we don't want stiffness. We want strength and we want intentional stiffness in these positions. That's mobility. So if you do it all together, you'll have a healthy system that's strong, that's mobile, that's elastic and resilient, that then can go and be durable in any setting. And that's the most important part, is you have to remember that running is a contextual piece. It is one part of the equation. You can't just go and run and scratch that itch and then not do the other parts to take it seriously. If you want to be a runner and if you want to take it seriously, you have to support that entire endeavor. Running is one piece. A lot of people get started because it's fun and it's accessible and they just want to do that. They want to keep doing that, they keep doing that, and they don't develop other tools. Lifting weights, being able to do sprints, being able to play sports, swim, throw, calisthenics, all these other pieces, those are important parts of the puzzle. And just like any good balanced breakfast, there's a bunch of things to go into it. Running is just one part. And if you become a running junkie and you only do that running itch, you'll lose your range of motion, you'll get stiff, you'll get injured, and you'll lose your fun personality because no one likes to be around someone who can only run and not do anything else. So don't be a junkie, be well-rounded, make sure you take your strength training because that will focus on using your body as a resilient unit. And that leads into the next part, which is a spinal engine theory. And that's what we'll talk about in part 5, which is understanding your body as a fluid unit that is a system that works together for a goal. And remember, if you need help getting your body moving and understanding where to start with strength training, what that looks like, I have resources for you, specifically my Athletic Foundation program. It'll teach you how to connect your body, get you moving, get you out of pain, and get you the basic foundation for what strength training could look like, and you can build up from that. Once you start to get those things down, then we can start thinking about your body as a bigger unit. And I'll see you in the next part with Spinal Engine Theory. Thanks for watching.